Well, good day, everybody. Today I have the honor to talk to Vincent van Dijk. Vincent is an information security specialist. He is the founder of Security Scientist. He is the creator of the cybersecurity canvas. And he is on his LinkedIn, at least, living in Amersfoort, Utrecht, so the Dutch area, the Netherlands. But in reality, he's now live from Denmark, I believe. It's great to have you, Vincent. Welcome.
Welcome. Glad to be here. And LinkedIn is not very accurate indeed. I'm generally speaking living in Denmark every day, but my business is in the Netherlands, so that always stays there.
That's good. So you're already a multinational from start.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. So for those of us who don't know you yet, just take a minute and describe your background and how you ended up in cybersecurity.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting journey actually. So I started off with software development. That's where my expertise lies, but I very soon started to branch off into data science. And yeah, my first real data science project that was also where I got hired first was for a security company. So day one, first day in the field, security combination with data science. So that makes the story actually pretty short. It's more the story how I finally left data science and went on my own. So I first did data science. I did it for a security company. I collected all the data, made advanced AI models that even today I would say work really well. Got into reporting, especially on how do you report effectively what your cybersecurity services are doing. And then I figured out, look, this is all really nice and well, this data science, but it's not really driving the impact that I want. Companies are not really getting more secure just because you have the latest, best AI model. And that's when I slowly started moving into consultancy to finally become I think the best name for a position was like CTO of a cybersecurity startup, to finally start my own company. And that's where I'm now, and now I'm helping companies on data science part. So I'm helping a lot still on the data science, but in a security context. And secondly, I help a lot on the GRC of compliancy, policies creation, strategy creation for most companies, either for general information security or in a security operations center, because I'm not leaving my first job within the security operations center. It always stays with me.
It stays with you. That's actually an interesting journey that you've done so far. You started as a developer, you said. I saw you had some Python experience, and then you moved into data science, and now into cybersecurity. So what kind of triggered you to move from data science to cybersecurity?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. So I had a very good year where the only thing I had to do was focus on building AI models. And this is really interesting because what I was able to do is that we had this big CMERA application with all the data, and I made an exact copy back then in Elasticsearch and started running AI models on it. I built the whole AI system around it, with predicting, retraining, everything automated in Python. And since there was not really anything on the market available, at least against reasonable price, I built it all myself. And I did some really amazing AI models. But the problem is while I was building this, I saw that for all the other use cases we had running in security detections, companies didn't even know what to do with those to begin with. And that was my first trigger. I was like, okay, so we have these very simple things. Let's say we're a malware alert about a malware on a specific system. And some of our customers would only respond to that 2 or 3 weeks later, right?
2-3 weeks, crazy,
Yeah.
crazy times.
Yeah, so they would take, they would buy our service for, let's say, big sums of money. We would send them alerts and investigate this. We found this issue. And those companies were like, yeah, we don't have time for that. We planned something in our calendar every 3 weeks, and then we would maybe look at it. That was basically their mindset. And that made me realize, yeah, I'm coming with these AI models, which are more complicated, more difficult, but if you cannot do the basics right, then yeah, what's the point? This got more extreme once I started, apart from building AI models, I started building the reports. So what I was doing is like, I would find KPIs, from the SLAs and from the SOC processes, and I would data reports, like how many incidents did your organization hit, which risks did they hit, what is happening. And that got even more emphasized from how we have such difficulty with dealing with the basics. We often don't even know, at least back then, we didn't even know why we were detecting things. Is it for security reasons? Is it for compliance reasons? We didn't really know. We detections, you can the classic just enable everything that's out of the box. That was generally speaking the mindset. And people, I could see in the report, it had no effect on the security posture at all. And that's why I started thinking, look, I think I need to move. If I want to make impact, I need to move into a different direction. I need to be more on the forefront. I need to be in the strategy. I need to figure out why this is happening. And if we can figure out the why, then maybe AI detections will be relevant. But start with the why. That is basically my thought process.
Interesting. So you were training a model that was successful in detecting cybersecurity incidents or events, let's say, that were raised towards an incident. You mentioned it to the company and they would say, yeah, we'll take our time and we'll see when we fix it. And you were thinking like, this is not the way to go. I need to go upstream towards the strategy decision-making process there.
Yeah, and it was like the model I had was like, for example, I had one model which could actively predict abnormal behavior, but even behavior on like, it's almost a privacy issue, because I could even predict how productive you were as a person based on network traffic.
What does that mean? Predict how predictive somebody is?
Yeah, I could, for example, see when people had low periods in their productivity, or when they would go on holiday, or when they, maybe they had the house renovated, and I could see, like a dip in their behavior. And I could say, look, I think he's on a holiday. Because I knew a rep, because we had, especially if I detected internally, I knew a lot of people, so I knew, who is very productive within the company and who isn't. And I could, for myself, very easily see, okay, if they have these kind of classifications, I just know it's a productive person. If they don't, then it's another productive person.
Interesting. So let's dive in a bit deeper into that. What were the key findings that you discovered on a productive versus unproductive person?
Sounds really simple, right? For example, email traffic. Like people that would be very involved in email, they tended actually to be more productive. And the ones that didn't, they were often, watching YouTube, Facebook. It's the classical stuff. Okay. It's not complicated at all, to be honest, really.
Yeah.
It's
and you were monitoring all this data, and then you're running it through your machine learning algorithm, and then you had a nice prediction. But then, okay, you say it doesn't impact enough. It doesn't really help the security posture of the company. So I'm going upstream towards cybersecurity strategy, let's say.
Yeah.
So how does that impact your current role as a, let's say, inventor of the cybersecurity canvas?
Yeah, so that one actually, it really moves the story along, because I moved more into consultancy, and what I did with the same what I did with data science, the first thing what I did when I moved into consultancy is I wanted to innovate the way it worked, because I didn't like the way it worked now, so it needed to be different. So I started coming up with new ideas to be more efficient in the whole consultancy process, how to figure out what the why is and how to connect it with the what. All kinds of fancy things. We did agile, I called it like agile consultancy and agile CISO as a service, stuff like that. But I figured the core issue was why and the what and how to connect. And when I started doing my, that was in Antwerp Management School, I started doing my thesis. I wanted to, dive deeper into it. And that's when I came to the canvas. And the canvas pure principle of the canvas is you want to connect the why with the what. It's the whole point of the canvas. So on my website, you have why am I doing what I'm doing? What are my risks? What does my company want? What's my mission? What's compliancy issues, whatever. And on the loud side, it's like, what are we gonna do? Like, and how does that correlate to the left side on why you want to do it? So that whole connecting and figuring out what has most impact, that's where the cybersecurity conference is all about. And that was the exact question I left with when I left my data science role.
Interesting. So we'll talk more about the canvas in a moment. But when I take a look at your writing on LinkedIn, which you do often, and you have a lot of articles as well, you emphasize the importance of writing in a cybersecurity context. You even have a service around it to help people write reports and papers. So could you elaborate more on the importance of writing in cybersecurity?
Yeah, so the reason why I think writing is so important is because the writing is like thought, right? And the thing is, especially in cybersecurity landscape, because we're touching so many different domains and so many different topics, it becomes more and more important that you can put your thoughts down on paper and discuss it on paper. And what I see way too often happening is, people, they start with all good intentions, they start a cybersecurity program, they start doing theories, and maybe they did it right and they used my canvas and they figured even out why they're doing it, what they're doing it. But I can already tell you, like 2 weeks later, maybe even the next day, something new happens, they forget all about it. All the discussions they had in their head. And that's why writing comes in. It's not the only clearing out your thoughts so you know exactly what you want and why you want it. It's also the way you can communicate it and keep it relevant. So if you go back to the canvas and you have written about it, you can see, oh, this is what we're doing. Let's do something extra. You can build. It's also, if you take civilizations in general, it's like the biggest difference between when the civilizations become like hunter-gatherers to like a full-fledged extreme civilization is the coming of writing. If you only start doing the production cycles without thinking about what we're doing and writing it down, we keep ourselves in a circle and we can never really expand. So only when you start writing it, you can expand. That's for me like so important.
I remember the quote from Dr. Jordan Peterson, who said that writing forces you to organize your thoughts in a structured way. And then when you share it with somebody, you get feedback. You think, I need to fine tune this part. In my head, it's clear, but apparently not on paper. So I'm fully with you on the point that writing clarifies thinking and makes it sharp, and you condense it to maximum impact.
Yeah, exactly.
But when you say writing in cybersecurity or information security, I'm thinking of writing policies, writing guidelines, but I think you mean more with that than just writing policies. So what is the impact there on the higher level, the strategic level?
I mean, if you talk policies in general, it's like, if I read a lot of policies in cybersecurity, it's very furry and complete bullshit. So they would write right now, like, I don't know, like we need an annual pen test. I'm just saying a random sentence that you sometimes see in policies. I'm like, yeah, what for? Who is it gonna do it? What is it gonna mean? What are we gonna do with the results? Why are we doing it? What do you mean by pen test? Is it this? Is it this? Or is it that? Is it on the whole organization? Is it on the application? What do we want? And that is why writing is so important, because if you, especially in a policy or in strategy, the way you formalize that sentence has direct impact on what people need to do and what they're going to do it. So yeah, if you're writing, you need to have a pen test, then everybody is going to grab random pen tests everywhere and just start doing stuff. If you write, every high risk application needs to have a pen test according to this method, organized by this person and approved by that person, it becomes a wholly different spectrum. Now everybody knows what to do, it won't be a chaos. You know that the results you're getting are actually useful, so you don't get a pen test that doesn't really do anything. So that's the impact of writing, because that sentence in a policy can change the whole organization, right? If you say, for example, no application is allowed to have personal data in test environment, that's actually a case I had recently. That means all the engineers are going to need to revamp all the test environments to remove the data and make sure it never happens again. That's immense impact. Just one sentence. And that's why I think it's important.
But that presupposes or has the assumption that the policy is actually read and applied, and not just thank you very much, Vincent, for this great policy, and then we shelf it.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that you go from paper and words to impact?
It also has to do with good writing apart, because I think a reason a lot of policies are just ignored is even if a person tries to read it, it doesn't make sense, right? It's not clear enough. It's not in the language that we understand, because I don't know, maybe an external came in, right? And he starts writing in a language that nobody in the company uses. They won't get it. And second of all, you need to guide them through the policy. So you need somebody that can explain the policy and make sure, preferably, my best thing is let the organization write the policy themselves. Writing and contenting their thought, the chance that they will execute in it is really big. If they can't do it because of time limits, then you can maybe support them, but make it unique to them, right? Make that whatever they said in that meeting where you had a discussion with them, make that come back in the policy. Use the same words. Make it theirs. That's what it's about. And once the person has like, oh, this is something out of my output, even though they maybe didn't even read it, and it's useful, I can understand it, I can explain it, I can take this policy to somebody else, because it's a chain. It's not just you putting it at the next person, it's the next person needs to put it at the next person, and the next person needs to put it at the next person. So it needs to be really good.
So when you consult companies, who are your main stakeholders that you interact with?
It depends very much, right? Like, preferably you would always take the highest possible stakeholder you can, right? That's like the security dream. We want to be on management, on board level. But in most cases, let's be honest, that's not really possible. In most cases, if I'm an external, there's one, maybe an IT guy or a security guy within the company, maybe a CISO or he's IT manager. We understand the importance of cybersecurity. He hires me, and we need to work on it together.
So that means that when you created the cybersecurity canvas, you had this output in mind that it needs to make more impact. Writing needs to be more clear and more effective, let's say. So how are the results of the canvas so far?
Yeah, it's a really nice questions. The results are, I would say, it's pretty immense, because you could really start condensing the thought. I wouldn't say that the canvas is some kind of end tool to, it's not a policy, right? Like in the end, it needs to inform your policies and your structures, but it's a really damn handy measure to consolidate your thoughts in the strategy, and also to compare, right? So I had one workshop where we had multiple big hospitals in the Netherlands, and I let them create 3 canvases, like the minimal approach, the medium, and like the premium. What would we do if we had the best of the best? And the biggest impact of the canvases is the change in thinking, right? The connecting of the why with the what. Is the canvas like in the product in itself something that people have to swear by? No, most likely not. But it's a really good starter for any kind of effective writing, because if you can connect the why with the what, you can write a lot more efficient. And I see a lot of companies I use it for. They made a few crucial decisions based on it that just changed the whole way they did security. It's like, that's what I said. It's like one line in a policy that all of a sudden enables the whole security, which wasn't there before.
Great, nice. Now you've written or helped companies write good policies across different industries. So when you take a look at the different segments and verticals and industries there are, how much would you say is always almost the same, And what's the percentage that's really unique to that industry?
It's not always just industry. It also very often has more to do with size and culture. Like the content of the content, let's say if you talk about risk management, right? The content of the risk is very different from industry to industry. There are a few key risks which also always appear in every risk management, but generally speaking, it's very different from industry to industry. But for where you tackle it is really different, and that has especially to do with culture and size, not per se by industry. Industry dictates culture and it dictates size, but it's culture and size that most important, because if you're with a small team, your policy becomes way more, you can slim it down way more. You don't have to be very specific because people understand. They can, they can see what process and that means something like this for me, I can work with it. But in big organizations with a lot of different departments, you need to be extra clear, especially if you're in organizations where the speed of the organization is a little bit slower. Maybe they're all a little bit Dutch, so they have a culture of discussing everything with everybody. That decides way more how a policy should look like.
Size and culture versus then the industry. Yeah. Okay. But then let me rephrase the question. Like, if those two are the key differentiators, what then is really specific? Because, for example, the risk of unpatched devices or the risk of not having multi-factor authentication, those controls are just universal, right? Every industry size needs it. So what would you say is like a percentage when you have your entire report? What percentage would you say is like really this is specific towards this company?
It depends, yeah, but I would say almost 80 to 90%. And the reason I say that is not per se MFA might be the end result always, but it's not always the why. The why is different for every company. Because what I'm attaching it to is I also have another model I wrote together with Gilbert, and it's like the risk model canvas, which is about taking the business model and then turning it into a risk model. That's basically the idea of it. And if you attach it to the business model and you can think, why is MFA important to our business and our business model and to our customers? That it's always different. So, the risk becomes way more like, hey, if these applications get hacked, then we cannot serve our customers in this specific service. And the biggest, and because that's to internet, it's very, one of the best protections is one of the concerns is MFA. But it's a very big sentence before we get to MFA, right? And MFA doesn't really change business people. Business people are like, yeah, MFA or whatever. I just care about what I'm protecting, right? And that is the business, the future of the business, not reaching business goals, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So linking the technical controls to why are we doing this, and like from a business perspective, linking that is the biggest added value, and then it changes how people think.
It's one of the most needed ones, because I would say as security professionals, we're so stuck in, we think MFA is needed, and because it's needed, well, why are we even discussing this? And that is really much the thought with going on. But if you cannot explain the why to somebody else, just because you think it's needed, it's not really needed. So you really need to focus on the why, because if you can explain the why and you can have a story, you can really sell it to an organization, and that's what you need.
Yeah, makes sense. So interesting there. So then we move to the topic more of data-driven decision making. So often in information security, we see organizations that have their gut feel, and then we need to invest in this project because I think it's over there, versus a real scientific data-driven approach. So from your perspective, in what way does data-driven decision-making play a role in cybersecurity?
Until now, too little. Let me put it like that. But it should be. On one of the most interesting factors, I think is really interesting. A lot of people that we say in the industry, it's like, human factor is biggest reason why we get hacked or something like that. 93%. When you read one of the best reports I think out there, it's the Verizon Data Breach Report. It doesn't say anything about that at all. It's not even close to the most important risk. The most important risk is by far people were reusing passwords and hacking into systems based on passwords they found on the internet before. By far the biggest risk. Biggest risk number two, or biggest threat, I must say, is just hacking web applications on the internet. That happens by far the most. So it should be way more in there. We should read those reports way more. We should also be way more skeptical about vendor reports, because we often see, I don't know, as a security awareness company, and they're like, yeah, human factor is the biggest. And I'm like, well, of course you're saying that. You're an awareness company. You maybe do phishing programs. The only data you have is phishing and awareness. Of course you're going to say that, right? Mm-hmm. You need to be way more skeptical about that and read those reports. I don't think it needs to be fully scientific, but at least read those reports and let them influence your risk decisions, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So, but if you talk about, let's say, data-driven, read the vendor-neutral reports and take those top 2-3 threats seriously, then you're like facts-driven instead of feelings-driven. Then we come basically to the topic of Europe trying to secure its infrastructure with NIS2 coming out in, October, I believe. The Belgian Parliament just a few days ago signed it into the law. So what is your take on NIS2? Like, will it change Europe for the better? What's the impact, you think? And also explain a bit, like, what is NIS2 for our international audience?
Yeah, so let's start. What is NIS2? Is NIS2, if we really put it real simple and where most people care about, is this regulation, which is a little bit like GDPR. It's not very different. Yeah, companies basically have to comply to certain security measures. That's what most people care about. That's a horrible, like 90% of the document is actually about how countries should implement it, where to look at, how to do instant response, who to make responsible. But for most companies, the only thing that matters is the minimal measures. It's, like those few requirements, just like the GDPR, like customers should be able to delete their data. That is one of the GDPR things that had like big impact. And I have a few more of that. And NIS2 will have the same thing. A few sentences. Again, I come back on my writing. A few sentences, they say in the policy, dictate almost everything.
Such as, can you give an example?
First of all, you have the minimal measure section, which defines what you minimally need to implement. If you start about writing, I will give you an example of really bad writing, and that's in the NIS2 document. Because the minimal measures there are so extremely fake. It's really hard to figure out what they mean with that. For example, one of very minimal measures is, for example, basic cybersecurity hygiene. What the hell is basic cybersecurity hygiene? Is MFA that? Apparently not, because they made a separate statement about MFA, so apparently it's separate. What do we mean by that, right? They don't write it. We also have like a statement that is like human resource security, asset management, and I don't remember the last one. The last one was like, access control. That's one statement. It's not separate, it's one. It's like, what do you mean with all those things, right? Of course, they do it like that's a good thing to know for everybody. It's a risk-based approach. So they want everybody to do risk management and make appropriate measures within those minimum measure categories, risk-based. But yeah, of course, for most people, risk-based is still a little bit fake. This will definitely drive the whole consultancy or industry a little bit further ahead. Luckily, I'm part of that industry, so that's nice.
So what you're saying, okay, that's NIS2, but then the question is, how will it really secure or improve the security posture of European organization?
I think the best way to look at it is to look on what the impact of GDPR is. Because it's by far the best example. It works the same way. You have the privacy law, European is GDPR, all the countries have the individual implementation or version of it. So with NIS2, not only different with NIS2, it doesn't apply to everybody. But like GDPR, where American companies, for example, shouldn't really be hit by GDPR, but still aware because we're doing a lot of business in Europe. The same is here. Everybody that does business with anyone needs to comply to NIS2 most likely gets the same questions as directly forwarded only in, well, from companies that need to comply to it. We're most likely just take the NIS2, make turn it into questions, and you, as a smaller supplier, you get them right there in your email box and you need to answer the same questions. I think it will have big impact on Europe. I think it will have big impact on the world, on America. Will it really make big leaps in security? I don't expect, but I think it will make people more aware, just like GDPR did.
Yeah, exactly. So the awareness is now starting to kick off, where organizations used to say security is for my IT manager. Now it's with NIS2, if I'm not mistaken, that they can even the executives can be personally liable if they mismanage their information security. So I think that is what NIS2 also triggers, a bit of fear, but also awareness. And I think that combination will help bolster the security.
Yeah, I think that's by far most important, that they'll get liable and that they have like a compliance pressure from outside. And what the exact content of the NIS2 is, it doesn't really matter too much, because the big guys, they don't, the big management teams, they don't care too much either. They just know that they need to do something with NIS2. That's generally speaking what they're thinking about it.
So let's transition to the topic of cloud computing, which is more my cup of tea. I've seen in Belgium, at least, the rise of public cloud in 2015-16 really taking off. Organizations are, let's say, outsourcing their servers to the cloud. But of course, then the question becomes, how do we secure it? How do we govern it and keep it compliant? Because it's running in different data centers across Europe. It's either Microsoft or AWS or Google. In your opinion, how do you see cloud computing impacting information security?
Very interesting question. I think, first of all, the cloud is definitely huge. But I mean, that has been a topic for years now. It's not really that special anymore in that sense. But I must say, especially if you take Europe and the complete reliance that we have now on Azure, that's really big. So I think what is good, it's consolidates more, so you can it's easier to do security measures because it's all within a space. Like, for example, if you have Azure, then you can, if you want to do a policy, wear it out on the complete Azure environment. So that kind of things are great. I think it will do way more demand in security companies to use the cloud tools. We will definitely get more and more into some kind of vendor lock-in. I have a little bit of mixed feelings about it, if it's really for the better or not. First, I feel a lot of companies are losing control, right? They don't really have the general control they used to have in the past. Only for reliance in the cloud, where they say, yeah, it's in the cloud, whatever, right? It's if Microsoft fails, I guess we fail too. That's generally the statement, right? So I don't really think it's per se better for the awareness and mentality that people have. Whether it is a big deal, on the side, I must also say I see also companies moving a little bit, like now it's been very much we go to the cloud, and now we will see like going back to the native systems, because we figure out, oh yeah, if we have these systems that do work continuously, we can just drop it on normal systems because it's way cheaper, especially if big data systems. It's really expensive in the cloud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the trend of cloud repatriation.
Yeah, I think we will move to more like a healthy hybrid. Yeah, okay. Big impact. Yeah. It's still hard to decide if it's especially for the better. I'm not totally sure if it's for the better.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm interviewing a lot of folks in the information security. One is completely pro cloud. Others are saying going towards a hybrid. Others are saying going back on premise. You get the mix, but in general, what I'm seeing is it's still very rising. Cloud adoption is hot. It is still, and I always shock clients by stating, if you configure a cloud right, it is more secure than if you just leave it on premise. But on the other hand, if you misconfigure a cloud, which is very easy, your data is on the streets available for everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly what you mean. It's like, it doesn't really matter if it's in the cloud and storage in your basement. If you don't configure and think about it right and it works right, it's like, that matters more what we do with it. Like, what do we write down on the policy and what are we going to do with it? It matters more than what we're using.
Yeah. Great. So, diving into collaboration with service or security service providers, at least in Belgium, I think 90% of the organizations are SME, small and medium enterprises. Only 10% like enterprise. So that SME segment doesn't have the skills or the size of an IT team to handle their security. So we're seeing more offloading towards a managed security apartment, let's say. Is that something that you're seeing as well in the Netherlands or Denmark? How's it going there?
Yeah, it's similar, but you need to divide the SME market a little bit, because the SME market consists, even if I'm like I'm a solo company, that's an SME company, right? And you have SMEs that's up to 250 people. Now the difference between 250 and 1 is a big difference. So I see the up market, let's say the 50 people plus, we're definitely moving to service providers. If it's better or not, that's another discussion, but they're definitely moving there. The smaller into that number, right, under the 50, that's definitely still an issue. Those are having difficult time security because the service provider is too expensive and they don't have the knowledge to do it themselves. That is where the risk still lies. And most companies are below that 50 number, right? So I still see a big risk there. I see some movement from different, and for example, Singapore, they have like a CISO as a service provided by the government for these kind of companies. So I see some moving in different regions where if the money doesn't come from the SMEs, but we still need to do it, let's provide it in another way. I see some other structures here. I think it was ASML that provides their smaller suppliers with security services and help and stuff like that. So there are some solutions.
The big enterprise says, I'm going to check my supply chain. I see I got some weaker links in the supply chain. Let me help them out. And so together we win.
Yeah, that's what definitely needs to be done. That's the only way to do it, because these SMEs, unless they get some outside help, they're not going to do it. So either like Singapore, where you get it from the government, you can get some funds, maybe some people, or from big companies that are out there, this supply chain, which gets more and more important, and more small software solutions are being built there. It's people for like teams of 10 people. Let's help them out. Let's give them a penetration test. Let's not let them pay for the penetration test. We pay for that, and we pay for the consultant to help them.
Wonderful, because in the end it is an ecosystem and you are relying on each other, so you strengthen the weakest link, everybody wins.
Yeah, we need more of that stuff. It's still very it's not done enough.
Wonderful, great point there. So wrapping up, Vincent, the future, 2 questions there. How do you see information security moving forward in the next few years, especially in Europe? And what is the future for Vincent himself?
Great one. I think some trends are still continuing. So the consolidation of security tools is still an ongoing trend, especially for bigger organizations, because it's too much. So they're moving all to, let's say, cloud with Microsoft, with Sentinel, with the vendor stuff, the lead package. I think that will keep on going. I think we will get more stressed out CISOs and ESOs and people getting stressed in the security industry because of work pressure, budgets which are a little bit shrinking, getting put more under pressure because, of course, there are more attacks happening and it's getting bigger and bigger. So, I think that will be ongoing as well, the stress that it will put on security people.
Which is a great opportunity for psychologists out there that just listening to this podcast, create a program to help burned out CISOs recover.
It's not just about them. We need a different mentality. I don't think it will go there, and I don't see a trend that the mentality will change. But these security people, they cannot figure out why. They don't get answers. They don't get the support they need. They don't get appreciation for the work they do. So, of course they're going to get burned out. So that's definitely a trend I see going on. Another trend, storm business, it will become more and more of a business issue. NIS2 is a big example. So compliancy will definitely increase a lot. And that's also a trend you see. I read the report of Facebook last time. Like they had like a list of all the compliancy regulations that were heading them way. And like a few years ago it was just one or two, and now like a whole bulk of compliancy is happening at once. And I think that will keep on going.
And in your future, Vincent, any books or courses you're going to give or digital products you're going to do?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm finishing my non-cyber related book that will be coming out, I hope, in a few months. And at the same time, I'm writing my cybersecurity book. I think that's like take a year or something. But
what's your non cybersecurity book about?
It's about making choices and using making a reference to old mythology, just like it did also with the civilizations, about how these old mythologies actually, these stories which have been told for thousands of years are actually helping us to guide to make choices and to make braver choices, and not to, we need some more brave choices, right?
Definitely. When you have a book out, just let me know and I'm happy to review it.
Yeah.
And your cybersecurity
book will be very interesting. It's going to be titled along the line of how to become the best cybersecurity expert out there. I'm not going to make it a weak book. It's going to be a strong book, and it will cover a lot of these topics. Mindset, what kind of tools you should use, what kind of approach you should take on, to reduce burnout, increase efficiency, etc.
Nice. Really love it. I love your ambition. I love your goals. I love the way how you explain cybersecurity. Really wonderful. Vincent, thank you very much for joining us on this episode.
Thank you. It was really glad to be here. And finally to see you on the camera. It's really nice.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Vincent. Have a great time.
You too. Speak to you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Blue Dragon Podcast, a podcast dedicated to IT decision makers and helping them gain perspective of what's going on in cloud, AI, and security. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe to the channel so you'll be up to date all the time when new episodes come out. Your support really means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Have a great day and see you next time.